So we talked about MAC addresses in the previous lecture, which is the physical address of the network interface card on any network device that's burned onto the network interface card, and it never changes. Well, in this lecture, we're going to talk about its counterpart, and we're going to talk about the IP address. And the IP address is a logical address that's assigned to a network device by the network itself. And for example, what we're used to seeing is something like this: 192.168.1.131. And I forgot to put my dot in there, so let me put that in there. So this is what we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing this 192.168.1.131. And what this is an address that's assigned to your computer or your server or your tablet or your iPhone or anything else by a router on the network or a server that gives out these addresses. And so, this is what you're used to seeing. For example, if you set up your home network and you have it with Comcast or somebody else or some other provider and you're having issues and they say, okay, well, what's your IP address listed at? Tell me what your IP address is, or here's the IP address to get access to your router. This is what we're used to seeing. And this is a specific type of internet protocol, and specifically it's version 4. And so you'll notice up here I have v4, and down here I have version 4. So this has been around for quite some time. Version 4 has been the standard protocol. However, there is a newer one called v6, so version 6, but we're not going to talk about this in this introductory lecture. We'll talk about it later on in the course. So what does IP stand for? Well, it stands for a very simple name, Internet Protocol. And that makes sense because this is an address that you need to access the network and the internet. And so when you need to get your computer device out on the internet so it can communicate across the internet with Google or your Gmail or your online banking account or another server out there, you need an IP address. And this is it. Now, we want to talk a bit further about this. So we're used to seeing this 192.168.1.131. What we call that is we call that dotted decimal format down here. However, when a computer interprets it, it interprets it as something else. It interprets it as a bunch of ones and zeros. And what is the ones and zeros? Well, that's pretty much machine code, and what we consider that is binary format. And so when we're talking about binary format and machine code at the lowest level, 1 means it's on, 0 means it's off, and that's how it's going to be interpreted by your computer. However, for us to understand it, it's converted into this dotted decimal format. And so dotted decimal pretty much converts binary numbers into decimals. And we'll talk about how to do this conversion later in the course, but we're not going to focus on it right now. All you need to know is just be aware that when we see 192.168.1.131, we can convert it into its machine code, its binary code, and we can go back and forth. And that'll make a lot more sense when you get further into your career if you decide to go into the network and you understand subnetting and everything else. But this is just the standard format. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at how you would find your IP address. So what if you wanted to find your IP address on your computer? Well, you know what? We're going to do the same thing that we did before. We're going to use that same thing that we did in our previous lecture where we went to the command prompt and we did command exe. So we'll use that again, and let me get my highlighting tool out and ready so I can show you what I'm talking about. So we would go to our command prompt, and let me highlight that up here. And once we get in there, we would type in our ipconfig space /all, and then we'd look down and we're going to look for IP address. And let me show you on both sides. And there's your IP address. And you'll notice that it says IPv4. Now, some of your systems might be set up for an IPv6. And here's an IPv6 right on top of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull up my command prompt. So remember, if you're on a Windows machine, you're going to go to the start, you're going to go to run and type CMD. Or you'll just go to the search bar in Windows 7 or Windows 8 and type in the CMD. And it's going to go ahead and pop this up. Now let me go ahead and slide this over. Now if you're on a Mac or Linux, it's going to be a bit different. You got to go to the console, and the code is ifconfig instead of ipconfig. I'm not going to cover that because I'm on a Windows machine, but you can look up the exact code to get this as well on a Mac or Linux. So I'm going to type in ipconfig space /all, press enter, And remember, I'm on the same system as I was before, and I have all sorts of different IP addresses configured on here. I have a wireless card, I have a wired interface card, I have Bluetooth, I have all sorts of different things. So we're just going to look at the wireless card for this lecture. And let's identify it. So let me get my highlighting tool first. Let's find our IPv4, and it's right here. Do I have IPv6 set up? Yes, I do. Here's my IPv6 right on top of it. And just for fun, where's our MAC address? Because we covered that in our last lecture. Well, our MAC address remembers our physical address, so it's right there. And so we'll go ahead and we'll highlight these on the other side. So here's our MAC address. We didn't talk about IPv6, but here's our IPv6 address. And here is my IPv4 address. So for my Internet Protocol version 4, you'll notice that my address is 192.168.0.106, and we didn't really talk about IPv6 yet, so I'm not going to go into any of that. You'll notice that's a lot harder to read. However, we did talk about physical addresses, so the physical address is 34 DE 1A 14 FB F9. And that's it. That's how you do it. You go ahead and you look it up and you can find it that way. And it's always good to know this even if you don't decide to go into networking. If you're just taking this course to find out more about it, it's always good to know for home troubleshooting if you need to call up your service provider for your internet and they're going to ask you for some information. So that's going to go ahead and conclude our introductory lecture into IP addresses. If you have any questions, please post them on the discussion board and I'll be happy to answer. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the next lecture.